Hi, my name is Tim Carter. I pastor Landmark Missionary Baptist Church in Jacksonville, Arkansas. This is the apologetic and outreach ministry called IamKoine.org. I'm referencing a book called the Historical Wholistic Hermeneutic Process. It's a handbook for practitioners. It's the type and kind of hermeneutics developed by Dr. John Penn, the Missionary Baptist Seminary. He did that over like a 40-year period of time. The emphasis was so extensive, as it still is, that languages were merely a tool, hermeneutics was a science of interpretation, and then theology was a systemic, methodical approach that assured that a process that could be repeated was there. This topic is about, I have a reference from a book called Coming to Grips with Genesis by a man named Mortensen and a man named Uri. And you can get this if you want. I was given this book. I had no idea about it until it was given to me. But I was going to contrast the difference between day-age theory, which I never studied day-age theory. That's the intriguing thing about a language-based apologetic, and then a science of hermeneutic that is holistic, includes all the words in the Bible, all the different text and, of course, context, and then a systemic approach. You don't find yourself out there in Wonderland studying all these different things. So when I hear about it and then I'm asked what's the difference between divine ratio, for example, and day-age theory, well, let's just take day-age first. Day-age theory, and we'll set that there, and then we'll take divine ratio, and we'll see what the difference is. First of all, on page 31 in the Historical Wholistic Hermeneutics textbook, this right here, it says, seek first the Bible definition. It goes into, talks about how important that is. So here, the first thing I noticed is age is not distinguished. Age of earth is not distinguished between the time of the earth's existence. That is, the earth came into existence 6,250 years ago approximately, if the days according to which that's calculated are 12-hour days. Knowing night is 12 hours, that becomes an approximate 12,500 years ago, when simply multiplied by 360 lunar days would give a person 4.5 million days times 1,000 years would come up with the 4.5 billion years that it took thousands of years later and all the advanced technology to measure that. That's humiliating if you're an atheistic supporter of evolution, to know that a book thousands of years ago had knowledge of billions of years. But age and time of existence are not distinguished to my knowledge. Again, I'm not a day-age theory person, and in this book they made a reference to, if you went by the day-age theory or used 2 Peter 3:8 to support an old earth view by just arbitrarily placing 1,000 years in where days were, they said we would then have to conclude that Jonah was in the fish 3,000 years, or Joshua walked around Jericho for 7,000. So at this point, I don't know what day-age theory is, but if it's arbitrary or random, that's not an acknowledgement of context. Over here in divine ratio, students of the Historical Wholistic Hermeneutic Process, practitioners of hermeneutics, context. So as early as Genesis 2:4, we have the day singular, and yet we already have 6 days in the first chapter of Genesis. So the day in Genesis 2:4 refers to 6 days. So only when you have a context, for example, when the Bible says that in the day that you eat you shall surely die, speaking of Adam, God didn't threaten to kill him. He said you will die. Well, Adam died 930 years later, so he died within a 1,000-year period. So with that, the scriptures in their context indicate what God meant. God didn't literally mean within 24 hours you'll be dead, Adam, or Adam would have been. The Bible tells us that. So in the divine ratio, we distinguish also, this is number 2, this is number 1. We recognize the difference between the age and the time of the earth's existence. So we do that just as all Christians do with Adam. Adam was no more than 12 hours old the day God created him. Those of us who read the Bible at face value believe it literally. If that's the case, then as a scholar recently told me about his father, he said his dad always taught or thought Adam was 33 and a half years old when he was created, the age of Christ. And he had no argument with me, so he was advocating old Adam. And I didn't throw my Bible down, that is, speak him down and take my Bible and beat him over the head with it and walk out and say, well, I believe in young Adam. So I don't know what that is. But under this hermeneutic where we actually use the Bible, we know there's a difference between the age of something and the time of his existence. We also know because of the ratio in the Bible that nothing had to come to be any more than thousands of years ago, even the universe itself, in order for us to have an age and know the difference between the age. And here context will decide when the term the day, for example, in Genesis 2:4 refers to 6 days. And then, of course, when God said in the day that you eat, referring to within 1,000 years in that day. So this is hermeneutics. This is a science of hermeneutics. Also, in it we're free to recognize instant. We can support what the Bible teaches absolutely about instant and spoken creation, about Christ in the beginning. People teach about Christ in creation, that's fine. But Christ first and foremost in beginning. He was always being there, John 1:1. John 1:1. We don't have to deny this. We can affirm that. I don't know what they do here. I've never, like I said, just studying the Bible, I can't even speak about this. That's why I had to quote someone apparently who studied day-age theory, for I did not, and they never heard of divine ratio at the time this was written. This is like an old book now, 2008 or something, maybe 9. So, and I noticed they don't have in the subject index anything about instant and spoken creation, which the Bible teaches that. So when you are over here and you're free, you can do this. And then fourth thing, for example, Genesis 1 verse 2, you don't have to try to insert billions of years, which people are primed negatively, that is, and it's not their fault. All of us are that way. I remember thinking I was a Democrat until my dad called my brothers and I in and told us we were Republicans. Someone said, "Why are you a Republican?" I said, "My dad told me." So that's called priming. We were pro-gun, pro-ammo. He worked at a leading manufacturer of ammunition and firearms. So, but here you don't have to force billions of years into it. There's nothing that invites billions of years in verse 2. But if you say, well, what happened between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:3, if there's instant, and there is instant and spoken creation, the Bible absolutely teaches that. That's really not even debatable. Now, I don't know what over here is going on. I just know that when I was told that absurdity, as I read in that book, Coming to Grips with Genesis, that if someone just randomly placed 1,000 years where the word day appeared, that would be out of context. So random. If you use the context, the Bible will tell you when the author specifically, when God wants to mean a period of time and uses day, which is also from the same word that the word time is, and we can learn this in English. You learn a lot from the English when you see how did they know to say day here and then time somewhere else, and that's a very good study in context. But again, people don't really want all this stuff. That's why we were warned, Dr. Terry Parrish especially said our biggest enemy would be pragmatism. People don't want this stuff. Just tell me young or old, let me move on. Tell me tulip doctrine, TULIP, total depravity, unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace, persevering saint. Boom, I'm a Calvinist, instantaneous orthodoxy. God knows everything. God can do everything. God's everywhere. Can I go now? And that's just regrettable for people. It's regrettable any academic who studies a student of the Scriptures. So here we have under this, I guess I should more correctly say, this historical holistic hermeneutic. We recognize the foreknowledge of God who thousands of years ago. We see in that ratio Psalm 90 and verse 4, and then 2 Peter 3 and 8. And of course, in that book, Coming to Grips with Genesis, they talk about people who try to support old earth. But again, I noticed they didn't distinguish age of the earth from the time of its existence. Now, I don't know why that error occurred. I don't know why the error, it's so large that young and old earth has swept the planet. And yet, it hasn't occurred to people who are in such a hurry to pick sides that the Bible distinguishes between the age of something and the time of its existence. So, when they talk about old earth advocates, they don't distinguish, are we talking about people who talk about the age of the earth being old, or are they talking about the time of its existence? So, again, who really cares? I get tickled about it because I've studied so much to learn the Bible, and then found out that the power for people in this constructed world is just grab a hold of the latest construct and then take off with it. But then you have to ignore the distinction between the age of something and the time of its existence. You have to ignore context. You have to pretend you don't notice instant and spoken creation, which that's about Christ. This is the very gospel itself. Christ was always already being in beginning. And then you have to, people say you have to, over here, if you say gap theory, and I don't even know if they say that, but if you say gap theory, then people accuse you, and they don't know what else to do. They really don't know what else to do. They're primed to accuse you of forcing billions of years, but you don't have to force billions of years here. You don't have to do any of that. And you don't have to deny that there is something there in ratio, which ratio is the Latin word for what we know the Koine word logos. So Jesus is there. We know in the Paleo Hebrew we see symbols indicating Christ in the very first verse. We know he's the Alpha and the Omega, and there's two Hebrew letters, the Aleph and the Tav, that's there in Genesis 1:1. So really, I don't know what this is here, but if these guys know anything about the day-age theory, and they seem to have credentials, it says he is a PhD, history of geology, goes on to Campus Crusade for Christ. So they're Christian people. This fella, Master of Divinity, PhD, systematic theology. So these men are very studious people. Now, I'm not at all diminishing them by saying they did not make the distinction between age and time existence. That I didn't say they failed to. I don't say it's a failure. And I didn't say that they were wrong about whatever's random about day age. They may know exactly what they're talking about on this day age theory, and it may not be that they're just arguing from extremes, which is a fallacious argumentation where if you don't like something, you can just say, well, if day age theory is correct, then I guess Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3,000 years. They may have just been using hyperbole to show the absurdity. But again, you can also hear, you don't have to deny, you can accept here 6 literal 12-hour days and 6 literal 12-hour nights. So you can say, because actually those of us who know the Bible teaches instant and spoken creation, why would we have a need to expand 6 days of creation beyond even that? 24 hours is plenty since originally in Genesis 1:1. And then you can appreciate what happened. You can teach Genesis 1:2 something happened and then not fall for the trap. I mean, if you're going to let what people accuse you of, which is unfounded, this is where something becomes negatively connoted, and then it becomes a source of negative priming, where people will say, aha, you said verse 2 is come to be, so you have to be. That's an assumed apodosis with a presumed protasis. Well, it's a presumed protasis, the if, and then an assumed apodosis. So they presume that if you say come to be that you're advocating gap, because they don't know anymore. They don't know any more than that which they've been, according to which they've been primed. So this can be frustrating unless you're willing to study the Bible, and of course we are, and we're happy to. So whatever day-age theory is, it seems to have some problems. I wouldn't be an advocate. I wouldn't even know how to, and I don't think I'll ever even study it. I'd rather know the Bible. I'd rather appreciate the distinction between age and time of existence. I'd rather use the context to know when the word day is used for something more than 12 hours, when it might go as far as 24, or Genesis 2:4, it may go as far as 6 days, or with Adam it may go as far as 930, and then of course Methuselah only 969. And then I'd rather retain Jesus Christ in beginning, always, already being there. Genesis 1:2, I can then say something happened here without falling for the accusation of billions of years, for there's nothing to prompt us to invite billions of years here. Then you can still leave the day. So again, though, this is probably just for the few people that want to study for themselves, because you won't ever have a platform for the Bible. That is, these things will never be taught anywhere. I asked one person, was the Bible ever even intended to be taught? And they said, what do you mean? How could you say that? I said, well, no matter how plainly it speaks, no one seems to want to listen. And then if you say something about day being more than 12 hours, as Genesis 2:4 says, 6 days, refers to the 6-day period, you begin to be accused so quickly that sometimes you'd rather just avoid all that. Let's just go along with the least we can say. But like I said, if you want your soteriology to just be tulip, you want your eschatology just to be left behind, you want your Bible just to be King James and then don't even study it, no one to notice. And if you want your creation to just be 6 literal days, then okay, there's nothing immoral about that. It's pragmatism, and we were always warned about it, because it's scholars can be frustrated and say, why don't people want to study the Bible? Well, I mean, we're not here to beat people up because they don't want to know. People really just want to get on with their lives. So making disciples and them growing upwardly, that's time consuming, it's messy, and people that don't want to do it pretty well take a ticket to heaven, and they go pretty well do what they want to, and when they die, they're in heaven anyway. So let's not beat people up. Let's just tell them the good things in the Bible, show them the Bible was way ahead of the scientists of today, especially the ones who choose to be atheists and evolutionists. The Bible distinguishes between age and the time of existence. The Bible does give us context. It does speak of instant and spoken creation. It does tell us something happened in verse 2, and no, you don't have to fall for that silliness of billions of years being accused. And yes, you can have the days, I'd say evening and morning being the first day. That would be rather descriptive of a very good way of defining time in that verse. So you have a blessed day, and that's all I really know at this time, and I probably won't ever talk about day-age theory again. I'd rather study my languages, my hermeneutics, and my systematics. So have a blessed day.